Hi, Steve.
Hey, Jim.
You know what? In these dark, dark times, I can't help but try to remember what it was like in the before times.
What?
Well, before Discogs.
Oh, and welcome everyone to America's favorite podcast, Two Guys Talking About Records. I am Steve, a record collector.
And my name is Jim, and I am a record store owner. I think that's why we get along.
Yes, because he supplies me with my fix. So,
And you supply me with money to help with my fix.
yeah, so there we go. It's a win-win for both sides, unless you're the spouse. Then maybe not.
Correct. And it was like, okay, so how much did the store bring in for? Oh no, it went back into this. No, I'm kidding. It's a business. You know what that's like, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So this week on the podcast, Steve and I are going to reminisce. I have a feeling, and this is going to be horrible, but I have a feeling that both of us, especially me, are going to have several get off my lawn moments. It comes to the way things used to be, being a record collector rather, in a time before Discogs made our lives easier, better, or is Discogs really not there? I mean, sometimes I love it, sometimes I hate it, but there was a time that we lived without it.
Yes, there was. And there's a reason why records were a whole lot cheaper back in that time.
Yes,
Nobody had a
there.
clue.
So we'll delve backwards. I've got a couple of things that ways that I used to use before I was a store owner where I shopped. I mean, other than going to local record stores, there were ways to get out there pre-internet and find out what stuff was worth and find out how much and actually buy stuff from mail order at that time. A little bit more difficult, but I think it was, I don't know, it was just different. How's that?
It was different
Get off my
and
lawn.
time consuming.
It was. And now it's easier. It's also a little more maddening because there's so much there. But
Yeah.
we'll get into that here in just a couple of minutes on the podcast. But as this is the Vinyl Community Podcast, each week we like to show off our recent acquisitions. And this week is no different. We'll get to mine in a second, but I've got a couple because we had a small collection come in with some psych. So I'm scratching my head at some of this stuff. We'll let you get in on that here in just a second or so. But how did you do this week?
Well, as usual, probably too much. But, from our discussion last week about the variances,
Yep.
that is the Dead Kennedy album
Yep.
that Dead Kennedys did not want to be out there and made them pull it. And look, it was only $3.99. That's how cheap this thing was, huh? I like that they have the original price sticker on there. So it does have the heads on the back of the people,
Yep.
but the very first Dead Kennedys album, this is hard to find. I've been looking for it. I've seen it for very high prices out there. I popped into Discogs and I found one at a reasonable price for this. Okay. Now, if you ask a spouse, yeah, that was a reasonable price, they'll look at you and go, no, that wasn't. You're an idiot.
But for that, it's
Yes,
reasonable.
for this, it was a reasonable price. So this it's just an important part of my collection because of the early punk of it. So super excited about that.
That's it. Now you have another copy, a later copy
I
already,
do.
right?
I actually have a first. So when they pulled that, and it came out with the black cover. I have original of that
Okay.
with poster. This one didn't have the poster.
You were mentioning that you were thinking about it, but glad you landed one.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited. Brand new music, Lit out of Denmark. Yes, it's their second album. I know. I've been waiting. You've been waiting. We couldn't wait for this to happen. Ulf Lorentzen from Baby Woodrose. That's what he's most famous for. If you don't know Baby Woodrose, then just forget it. He's put out a couple solo albums that I absolutely love. But a couple years ago, he made the group Lit Sut. I have no idea how to say that. But there are videos of his band out there, and you can find on YouTube. Just a hard rocking trio out of Denmark. Lorenzen, really big into psych, but this isn't psych. This is just more power trio, hard rock music. Just some really, I mean, I'm super excited to get this. I ordered it, to come in from Bad Afro Records. Lorenzen, Bad Afros, where you can find his stuff at. So very excited that this thing popped in this week, and I can finally get that going. One of my favorite albums of the year right now.
Is that going to be a tough one to find on Spotify for the playlist?
No, everyone knows Lutzoot. And I have a Danish friend who sent me some Uf Lorenzen, and the very first Lutzoot is he autographed. Uf autographed it all. And actually, one time Uf commented on I had my favorite albums from a few years back, and I had his solo albums, my favorite album of the year. He saw that video and commented and thanked me for that. So, hey, it's a cool world on YouTube. Found this at a record store that I was at this week, The Dentist. And The Dentist is a kind of like a garage rock group, jangle guitars and stuff out of the UK. And they put out some singles. I don't think they ever put out an album. And no, actually, I take that back. They put out like 3 albums because this is the first one that they put out. They had Where Do the Roses Grow? I don't know. They had a single that kind of did something, but not in the US. I just know this band from my compilations box sets. And so Left of the Dial, or it might have been actually More Nuggets from the 80s.
Okay.
So I was excited to see this thing in there because The Dentist is a group I had been looking for some music from them. So this was cool to have. And then the other thing I bought at that record store, this is a 12-inch Enigma, The Sadness. It's out on, it really never came out on vinyl. At least it's not in the US whatsoever. And you'd have to maybe go to Europe and that, because I've looked to try to get a vinyl version of the Enigma album that had Sadness Part 1 on here. I love this song. To me, it's a big part. I think in 1989 it came out, and it's still something Gregorian chants going on in there, and just kind of a trip hop type feel happening. So here we have Sadness Part 1, the Violent US mix. Yep, the Violent one. The Meditation mix is on here, extended trance mix, and radio edit. So you can listen to this. You want to be violent, if you want to meditate, if you want to be in a trance, or just regular. We got something for everything.
The EP has something for every mood.
It does. It does. I mean, what more can you ask for on that? Oh man, I forgot my big purchase. Oh well, I'll show it next week.
Okay.
My Camper von Beethoven.
Oh yeah.
I got this in. I got some records from Radio Wasteland in. I had a CD of this one, New Orders, Power, Corruption, and Lies. And Jim had this come in, and I go, damn, no one picked that thing up yet. I'll take that. And I was really happy to get this. Great stuff. Very exciting inner sleeve, so I'm glad you enjoyed that. Yeah, just good 80s music, coming off Joy Division, the darkness of Joy Division, and then the more positive feeling music of New Order. So that was neat. I did not. Someone had sent me a Doug Waylo album after the flood. They sent me one, but what they sent me was it was in the inner sleeve. So this was like the cover, and I'm looking at my collection. Wait a sec. That don't look right. Pull it up. But damn it, that's the cover. So I really didn't have a cover of it. So Jim had this one come in, and this is a great one from 1989. I think one of their better albums. I mean, 1979. Sorry. This had Cheap Sunglasses on here. I Thank You's on here. It's just Dust My Broom is on this, which I love that song from Elmore.
Great album. That's a great album.
Yeah, yep. And the final one is one that I've wanted back in my collection. It's like expensive. I just had seen it. Jim had that come in. Also, Herbie Hancock's Future Shock, because it has rock it. So here's an album I bought because I like a song. The whole album's actually good. I like the whole album. I didn't know. I never even thought of this as jazz. It's before I really knew who the hell Herbie Hancock was when this came out. It His name didn't resonate because I knew nothing of jazz, and then I learned that, oh my God, his '60s stuff is my favorite from
Oh
Hancock.
yeah, yeah, it's good.
This, yeah, I was happy to have this. So it's been fun to listen and crank that up.
That song especially was kind of an early staple for early MTV as
It
well,
was.
that too, because it was so wild
It was.
what was out
It
there.
is still on the wildest. Watch that. Go, what the hey is that? And what's interesting is it was from an African American artist
Yep. Mhm.
before they
Now,
were
I
even out.
should mention also, Steve, he does watch our Friday videos. It's not quite the same as you coming in on Sundays, but I
Yeah.
do remember when you were still in town here, you would still watch the Friday videos, and I could tell if something important enough dropped, you interrupted the workday to bring it.
Yes, exactly. Now, because of time change and that, suddenly you're dropping them earlier, and I was like, "Oh crap!" I'm missing out. So yes, I do watch those religiously, and like every week, I seem to order something. I got two big things heading in here really soon. So
Just yeah, you do. And as soon as I get them shipped out, yeah, in the Mountain Time Zone, you're a little behind the folks that still hit us at
yeah,
11 a.m. on Fridays.
exactly. What you got, Jim?
Interesting week. Okay, so this week I had again, I'm supposed to be in a record intake moratorium
Uh
in the
huh.
weeks leading up to a Record Store Day, Black Friday event, or any Record Store Day event. I'm not supposed to be buying collections. I'll do trades, but I got a call the other day from someone. Oh, I got to get out of the house. We're having some issues, and we have to get rid of these records. Some are mine, some are my father's. But the typical rigmarole we talked about being an owner. That's the ups and downs. I get people doing this, but they never seem to understand when I say, what's the quality like on the phone?
Yeah.
How many do you have? And for some reason, people always undercount the number. Oh, we got a couple hundred. Well, that couple hundred turned out to be about 600. They're all in great condition, just happen to be, well, some of them made it through a fire several years ago, so there may be some smoky smell to them. So, um, but there was decent stuff in there, and I got a good deal, so I thought, what the heck, I'll bring them in. But it had not a lot, but a small clutch of psych rock music in there. Some stuff that I wasn't very familiar with as well. I'm going to show a couple that I'm not going to keep, but I did listen to them and I considered them, and one that I am. So a couple right off the bat that caught my eye because this looked a little familiar. It's the Poppy Family with Terry and Susan Jacks, and Terry Jacks, of course, went on Seasons in the Sun. So this predates that. Which way you going, Billy? Susan Jackson. I thought this is going to be cool, but this is really bubblegum psych. It's very poppy, much like Seasons in the Sun. That's a little darker, but this is
Yeah.
just happier stuff, and not for me. Then the other one that I thought was intriguing, and I couldn't find anything on this. I should have mentioned that that poppy one, by the way, was 1970. This one from just an artist named Michelle was 1969, and Michelle is AKA, and I could find no Michelle O'Malley, and I could find absolutely zero. Let me get back to my proper screen here, Steve. I lost you for a second. I could find zero bio information on this, but this is called Michelle. Saturn Rings, the only album she ever put out. Very, I want to say it's cross between Joan Baez and Judy Collins. Very, very folksy stuff, not very in there too. And it's just, again, not for me, but they both track fairly decent on Discogs. Go figure.
I'm pretty sure if I
Okay.
put that on my stereo, smoke would be coming off of it. Go, what are you doing to me, man?
It would be. Now, the one that I'm keeping, this is a fun one. Again, only album by this artist. It's called Saint Stephen.
Well,
And
good
let me
title.
find this here. Saint Stephen, 1969. And this is a gentleman that goes, his Saint Stephen's his name there, but it's Steve Cataldo. And he's from Boston, Massachusetts, brother of Lou Cataldo. This Stephen was in groups called the Front Page Review, Nervous Eaters, and the Reflectors. But St. Stephen's is listed as psych rock. 1969, and quite frankly, this is the only album that he put out as a solo artist. So, little sparse finding information on the very cool cover,
Yeah.
neat gatefold on the inside. It is straight up psych rock, late '60s psych rock. A little heavier on the guitar, which those two weren't, and I so this one's kind of fun. I gave it one good listen earlier, and we'll probably give it some deeper listens to see if it's something I dig. One of the songs on here, though, that caught me, the music just kind of ended. Well, actually, I should say it started off with sound effects like elephants and lions, like a jungle scene. And then the third song in on side A was actual audio, which I believe is from the 1968 Republican National Convention nominating process that he kind of wove a song into. So that was it was interesting, and I've not looked to see if I could find this on Spotify yet. But when I do, you'll get a sound sample of that. Fun
Neat.
stuff. Now, the rest of it I still have to go through. Like I said, there's not a lot of psych in there, maybe another 20 or so, but still some interesting stuff. I'll dig through that and see what's in there over the next week or two here.
Pretty
You
cool
know,
cover on that. I think that
oh yeah,
the artwork, which I mean, doesn't that attract us to so many albums? The artwork. I mean,
it is, and that's that was my first run through on these. Like, well, this looks cool. Well, that looks cool.
yep,
Well, that's not cool, but this one's cool.
yep.
Okay, speaking of cool, this is one I dipped to Discogs. I do this occasionally, because I've had something in my want list for a while, and Discogs is constantly bug. Oh, this is on your want list from those sellers that reload it every day, so you get a new message every day. That's why that happens on Discogs. But I finally pulled the trigger on a reissue because I at this point I believe that an original is going to be one of those never things to happen. This is from we're going to my Michigan collection, and the group is Index. I talked about these guys before. I think we were talking about Grails and what we're looking for. And this is just a reissue, a 1984 reissue. Let me find my thing here of 1984 reissue of a 1967 album, I believe. And this stuff, I've got too many windows open, Steve. I apologize here. It's garage rock. It's Michigan garage rock. The band is out of Grosse Pointe, so it's not quite Detroit. They didn't have that grittier sound of a lot of Detroit acid rock stuff did.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna try to think on this. Yeah, 67 originally released. It's listed as garage rock, psych rock on Discogs, but it didn't to me have that sound. The vocals on here, what really attracted me to, I first found these guys because they did a cover of 8 Miles High, the Birds song and such. And it was just a very reverb heavy version of 8 Miles High. The vocals were kind of drabbing through there. And I thought that's cool. And then listening to the rest of this, the vocals, it's going to be a lot like the Immortal Souls album when you got that one. You're like,
Okay.
well, these vocals aren't very good.
Yeah.
After you listen to it a few times, I can kind of get it. But it's almost like the best way to describe it is like the lead singer of Joy Division is fronting the Ventures. So you get that kind of just drab, dreary,
Yeah.
but a very reverb heavy garage rock in through. They do a cover of "You Keep Me Hanging on here as well. This is in Spotify, so I'll put those on here. Now let me show this real quick. This is why I opted for and the 80s reissue wasn't cheap either, by the way. But this is why I'm probably
Wow.
never going to get an original of this. I did some research. I guess that they only made about 150 to 200 copies of this original album. They gave it out to friends, and they sold it in shows in 68, 69 through there. But yeah, it looks like it's only sold once on Discogs for over $1,000, and there's none out there for sale. And holy cow, is it upside down? 800 and some odd plus are looking for this. So maybe I'd have to hit a garage sale down in Grosse Pointe sometime just to try to see if I can ever find one of those. But Index, very cool group. There's a few other reissues of that out there, and they've got some compilations that they did in the early 2000s on compact disc. So neat stuff.
Just the vocalist, his range, his musical range wasn't that great. Yeah.
It's way down here, and it just kind of carries.
Yeah.
Okay, one other one. This is a college radio fave, and I'm keeping this because it's really not going to be saleable in the store. It's Edie Brickell and the New Bohemians, the Shooting Rubber Bands at the Moon. I thought I got this, and it was dirty. It smelled. I've got some deodorizing dryer sheets in here, so that kept it from the shelves. And then when I did a test play on it, it's got a couple skips. So I'm just going to kind of hold on to it. I'll clean it and scrub it. I'll run it through the VPI. I'll work on it, see if I can get those skips worked out of it, and then decide. But it's just a good solid fun 80s album to have from there too. And then finally,
My God, you had a busy week.
I did have a busy week. Finally on this. Now this has got a story to go with it, like much everything else, Steve. This one came in. You may have seen me post this on social as
Yeah.
well. This is an album that's simply called Music from the Motion Picture FM. Let me zoom in here. So originally you'd think, well, this is a soundtrack. And I said, well, I've seen the FM soundtrack. It's a solid classic rock soundtrack. Seeger and, Steely Dan's on there, James Taylor, Billy Joel, the Eagles. It's a great soundtrack. And I thought, well, this isn't that soundtrack. What's up with it? And then you read over here, not the original soundtrack. It's what it says very, very prominently in there. Not the original soundtrack.
Music inspired by.
Yeah, inspired. So I thought, well, okay. So what they've done then is they've gone through and let me call this up here, share this. What they've gone through is they've just gone through and compiled these artists at a different layout. This is a Pickwick album, so they're kind of like just barely a step above K-Tel with what they would do. But no, this is not the original artists. These are unknown cover artists. You go into Discogs and it says unknown artist.
Wow.
These are all studio and session musicians recreating Steely Dan, Bob Seger's Night Moves, the Lido Shuffle by Boz Scaggs, Billy Joel, Tumbling Dice by the Rolling Stones, and Life in the Fast Lane. And you know what? They're not good covers.
And you have it.
I have it, and I'm going to keep it because I'm an old radio guy, right? So the song versions are horrible. I'm not going to find samples I can guarantee you to play for you on this. So you just have to take my word for it that they stink on ice.
Yeah.
They're just trying to fool people into buying this in the 70s and say, oh, it's the FM soundtrack. Now, more importantly, Steve, I want to show this. This is the cover. I got a little close up here of this FM ripoff from Pickwick. Not the original soundtrack, it says, by the way. But I got looking at that picture and I could just like thinking, man, that really, really does remind me of something in my older life. And then I went back through my old photo archives and I found this.
Yeah.
That is yours truly it's probably early 1986. It could have been 85, but this is me at WBKX, Northern Michigan University, my start in radio on college radio. So you tell me there is a bit of a similarity in those two somewhere.
Hey, you got two turntables and a microphone.
I do, well before it was fashionable. And now if you're curious what that is, not the original cover. That's a Rolling Stones Hot Rocks that I'm spinning, that somebody had destroyed the cover and they just put it in a generic one. But I will always remember those days of being on the radio. Man, it was so much fun. Actually to spin vinyl on the radio was just the coolest thing in the world.
Future episode, Jim. Why we have albums that really suck, but we still hold on to them.
And mine is going to specifically be because of that picture. And you know what? That would sit in the dollar room, and I don't think anybody would ever buy it. So I might as well just keep it and have that as a good laugh track someday. And my kids will look at that someday and go, "What the hell is this for?" I'll get rid of it because they don't have any concept of why that's cool. So,
I'm going to label your collection the Isle of Misfit Records.
There it is, and holy cow, maybe that's a full episode unto itself. I got a lot of those. I know you've got a few, but you purged a lot after the flood. So.
Yeah, I have.
Yours were proverbially washed away.
Yeah, those, and then when I moved, here, Jim.
What's left? So I will do my best, Steve, to put together a Spotify playlist on this week's acquisitions. I don't know how that's going to work, but we'll see where we can get. Yeah. I may just end up putting some of the original versions, but I truly cannot fathom just how terrible some of these are on here. You know what? I will, at some point after the holiday season, I'll put this up on our YouTube channel. I'll have some song clips just to have fun with it. So, okay. So find that very obscure release in Discogs, Steve. That was there.
Yeah, okay.
It was listed as unknown artist, but I'll be darned, it was in there. As a collector, and we've talked about how we've gotten into collecting, and my owning records days go back into the late 70s, early 80s, middle school, high school. I had records, but I don't really think that I considered to be a collector then. You know, I bought it because that's how we got music. You listen to the radio, you got that. We have covered that. It wasn't until I was wrapping up college, those college radio days where I had access to crap loads of records on the shelves there, that I really started to get into that. And then when I was done with college, I had a little bit of the income where I could actually begin collecting.
Yeah.
So we're talking early 1990s, 1990, 91 and such through there. And you know what didn't exist back then?
Discogs?
The Discogs and the internet. Well, Discogs primarily, but the internet as well.
Mhm.
Still the early days. But the internet wasn't something that we really could get into, and it was really just sparse by then, by the 93, 94 and through there. So how did we do it back then? How did you do it back in those prehistoric days?
Back in the prehistoric days, first off, pricing of albums really it wasn't a thing. I mean, you
No.
didn't even really think about how much is this worth. That wasn't part of collecting. Collecting, there were those that were in the know of what rare albums were, and they would be out there. For me, I had, the only thing I really used was this record guide, Rolling Stone record guide, and I have a variety of these, but there's no pricing, but it would tell me about certain albums. It would tell me this album 5 stars. Of course, it's done by Rolling Stone, so there's always bias, but
Yeah.
there, it would say this is a great album, and at times say there is a different type of cover, and it might mention something like that. But as far as pricing, not a clue. But when I looked at my collection, it was more about how much do I have
Yep.
versus how much is it worth. And
Yeah.
now, this day of age, a lot of that's changed for many collectors. It's how much is it worth versus how much I have. Not for everyone. A lot of people, they don't care about the price. I buy it for the music because what I love, and I commend them for that. But I know for me, it's kind of switched and go, boy, that's rare. That would be cool to have.
And I think that's a great point. I guess I never really thought about that in that fashion, because Discogs tosses that right out there in front of you. This is what your collection is worth. This is, this is what you've got. Let me call up Discogs here. It makes it so easy
Hmm.
to dig into here. I looked a little bit, and I think you did too, into the history of Discogs, and it
Yep.
started with a guy who just wanted to be able to catalog his EDM collection, his electronic music collection, a little easier.
And he had a spare closet that he could set himself up into. So
Yeah,
he went to his closet to do it. He was a closet collector.
yeah. Most every single tech startup in that era, the early 2000s, for example, started that way. It was just somebody who, Facebook. He just wanted to connect with friends and get them and share stuff with. I do remember early days of the internet too. I had one of those little blog things that I put up to share with families, so they could see shots of what was going on, prior to a social media. It was just kind of it seems like it was a more simpler time in this case, but like anything else, it grows and evolves.
Yeah.
Well, even before Facebook, you've got something like MySpace or so. That's you talk about old through there. It was just basically the idea of sharing the thing of what it is you do and what it is you love with other people, that was made easier by the internet and the connectivity that comes through.
Very true. And the internet just brought us, well, the information itself. I mean, yeah, you just think with the internet, even what it did to magazines.
Oh
It,
yeah, yeah.
it totally destroyed, a lot of the magazines because it's all here. Here's everything you need, and now, yeah, anything you want, you can find out on there. And obviously, Discogs just tells us what we want to know. And thank God for Wikipedia.
Yeah. Now let's for all of those of you who are listening or watching, just do a silent raise your hand if in the 90s you ever printed out your entire collection on 10 to 15 sheets of paper and carried it with you into a record store. Had you ever done that, Steve?
Well, so here's what I did. First off, my whole collection, everything was on index cards, and it was colorized by the type of music was there. Easy listening was a pink, classical was green, blues was in blue, rock was in white, orange was soul. I had this class. I worked in a library in college, okay, and so I had over 12 boxes of index cards because I had a massive
Wow.
collection of CDs. I found a library card catalog. That was the coolest thing in the world. I mean, I loved that. And if you watch my videos before the flood, you see that stuff that I had out there. But when I went to a record store, Jim, I would bring in about 5 of these to
Wow.
look at. And as I'm looking at records, I go, that one's rated 5 stars. This is a classic. Oh, look at that. And I could read about them, and I would be trying to learn because record collecting was a solo thing. I didn't know other record collectors. I was learning just on my own or stuff I would read in magazines. So I would come in, and even though I was there, I'd go down to the um, tapes galore down in
Yeah.
Saginaw.
Yeah.
I'd come in with 5 books, and I'd drop them down, and I'm looking at what's this album, and I'd be looking it up and seeing. So I had to have a variety of books because this edition was old. I needed the newer editions, but then the newer ones didn't have stuff this one had. So that's what I did. I carried a bunch of books around. Electric Kish, I brought up. Yeah.
And then I remember when you first started coming to visit me here at our store, you really didn't know what Discogs was.
Nope. Discogs, I had never heard of it. And I know what year did you open?
2017.
So 2017, I know nothing of Discogs. I go, so my wife says, hey, there's a record store in town. You're going to go? I go, yeah, I've heard about that because I already knew Bill Young. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go in there. Bill was saying it's really good. And I go in there and I'm just looking at these prices that Jim has on records. And I thought this guy was an idiot. I mean, what the hell? I mean, I bought that Led Zeppelin album for $5 and he has like maybe $30 on this. I mean, who would buy that? And I'm looking at some of these high prices. Now, I like Jim. Obviously, I kept coming back,
Yeah.
but I was having a hard time. Why these prices are so high because I've been shopping at antique stores for a buck. Other record stores like the one in Saginaw, they weren't using Discogs. It was like that's a $10, that's a $5, and just pricing stuff. I think even Electric Kish was not using Discogs totally yet.
Yep.
You were the first one that I really remember going in, and these prices were just like wonky as get out, and I'm not getting it. Why we would be charging too much until it was explained, and then I went into Discogs and I go, oh my, oh my, oh my.
Yeah, the philosophy behind that was to try to keep up with the ongoing trends, if you will, in the pricing through there too. And it was a tough one for me. I had discovered Discogs about 2 years prior to opening the store.
Mhm.
So I had seen that. I'd been buying on there. I'd started selling a few things on Discogs at that point in time also, as this was taking off. And so I was able to get in and really recognize the sheer immenseness of it, that you could dig in and say, okay, this is a Led Zeppelin. This is why this one's 30. This is why this one's 70. This is why this one's 5. And that, I think, from a collector standpoint, for me at least, was something that made sense. And I think folks now accept that a little more readily than when you had first met us.
Oh yeah, it does. Everyone knows about Discogs. That's a part of the landscape. But up until 2017, my collection was based totally on just how much I have and not how much
How
it's
much it's
worth.
worth. That's
And
a fantastic point in there.
yeah, and it took me over a year to put 12,000 CDs and records every night working Discogs to get it into my system.
Well, using it as the main inventory for the store, you now know my you now know my pain. I
Yeah.
mean, last night I was cataloging too. It's just kind of an ongoing thing, but that's because I use it as the main inventory pedestal, if you will, for the store, as well as I maintain a separate Discogs account for my personal collection. So that's all in through there. A little bit about the olden days. We talked about I used to carry printouts, but even that relied upon a computer. I had a computer, obviously, in the 80s, mid 80s, so started off with some Macs. But that gave me the basis of word processing where I could put a list and then I could rearrange that list on a spreadsheet. And not quite as geeky as you got with the handwritten index cards to there, but I did have that spreadsheet that I would print out and that would give me the idea. And little did I know, but I mean, that's the same basic idea that is Discogs. It's the idea that you've got this spreadsheet of information, whether it be in a computer or whether it be on handwritten cards. You did that old fashioned library spreadsheet
Yeah.
all on paper, but that's kind of the basis. It's all information when it comes down to it. And the spreadsheet in the computer gave us the ability to instantly rearrange that information in any way that we wanted to. You know, was it alphabetical? Is it by label? Is it by artist? Is it by year that the record was released? Is it by when we got that into our collection? And that essentially is Discogs in a nutshell. It gives you that information at the touch of a button, rearranged instantly.
Yeah. I tried to put mine into a spread. I mean, I already had on these cards. Like, okay, I'm going to put all these cards onto a spreadsheet. I think I got into the B's and I lost total interest in the whole damn thing. And I said, forget it.
Too far through.
In my books, I mark every time I found an album, I would mark it in the books. And so I'd have this pile of books. And if they were in each one of them, I'm going to each book and I'm marking in each one. So I knew what I had, no matter what, I wouldn't screw up. And so, but it was a labor of love. I mean, I love doing that, just cataloging.
Now, your book is the Rolling Stone. Let me show mine off here. And I had several of these. This is the only one I think I still have left now. And this is the Jerry Osborne price guide. This is a, oh, what the heck is, I think this is a 1990 issue. I'll have to go back and think of when this, but this was an annual publication from Jerry Osborne. Very thick book like your Rolling Stone. And I've got some images called up in here to show about these. But this was an interesting one too, because it really helped open my eyes a little bit about the how records were made. And let me just call this up here. If you look inside of the Osborne books, and again, these were published annually, you get a sample listing. So every single page of this book listed the artist and the artist heading, but it would break it down as far as things like the oh, you can see in here the labels and the other info that went with this. You know, like the Motown label, but it didn't specifically, not for everything. It did for some, mind you. It listed kind of a breakdown of catalog numbers, this catalog through this catalog. And that helped me realize, like you see down at the bottom here, it says the Motown 606, the catalog series of 200 to 300. They're numbering series through there. And then it gave you, well, that's the price range, I'm sorry, and the year it was released. And then the numbers are down in here. So I mean, it's a very interesting thing. But you think about ease of use. You with your stack of other books, and me with the Osbournes, and I did the same thing too. In my Osbournes, I would go through with a yellow highlighter and say, "This is what I've got. This is what I can go through." But again, this is just the sheer like, get off my lawn type of thing that I mentioned earlier. This is all we had. This is all we had to deal with when we were trying to say this. I'm going to be a collector. This is what we've got to utilize to base our decisions upon.
Yeah, Jim, and I always wondered how even would you decide what the price should be on anything like that?
Good thing you asked because they explain that. Osborne explains that in the book. And you want to talk about a cumbersome process. The pricing and how they did this was a very slow, and I have to find this in through here, how the prices were defined. Grading and price range. What Osborne would do is he would send this book out to the country's largest collectors and sellers, folks that would list. And we'll get to Goldmine here in a couple of minutes. But in the back of the original Goldmine magazines, you'd have full page ads of dealers who were selling records.
Yeah.
And so what Osborne would do is he had a clutch of several of these dealers that he would send the books to. And then over the course of the year, these dealers would mark up their copies of the Osborne book to say, this is what I'm selling this for. This is what I feel this is worth. And then send him the books back.
Okay.
And then he would incorporate those dealers' notes into the new edition of the Osborne book the next year. So you want
Oh,
to talk about a slow and just absolutely cumbersome process, because not only does that mean that the dealers and sellers would have to go through the book and make notations on what their prices were, then the Osborne staff would have to go back through dozens of these other books and create those changes into the newest edition.
wouldn't it be exciting to go to work every day? What you gonna do at work today? I'm going to go and put in prices.
I'm going to go through. So again, this is just another example of how the internet just made this completely obsolete.
Yeah.
I mean, absolutely obsolete, but also turns it over in just a matter of moments. Now, let's think. I want to take a closer look, if we could, Steve, inside of this Osborne, and I do believe again that this is. I'm almost positive that this is the 10th edition from 1990. He started these things way back in the 70s. So let me see here. 1993. Okay, so the 10th edition is 1993. So let's look at some of the things that you and I would normally look for. This, I took a screenshot of Pink Floyd.
Yeah.
And so it does break out some individual albums, but more importantly, it's just kind of giving you a rough idea of, in some cases, with Rush especially, this is the catalog number range. So these records were released in the 2000, 3000 range. So even in here, you see a few, and let me go to another Pink Floyd page here. So we see the Piper at the Gates of Dawn. I don't think those prices are really too far off of where they are today, 20 some odd years later. And
Oh,
he differentiates in through here. So the Tower, Piper at the Gates of Dawn mono, they have it $100 to $125, released in 67. Piper at the Gates, the orange label mono, $50 to $75. Okay, maybe they're a little bit more now, but I don't think that they're too far out of line.
think of inflation.
Yeah, there you go.
Now, I mean, that's a
Now they're
lot.
up.
Yeah.
Here's something nearer and dearer to your heart. How about the Velvet Underground and Nico with the banana peel cover? So in 1993, according to the Osborne book, the Verve 5008 Velvet Underground and Nico mono with banana sticker on the front cover, back cover picture, also upside down torso of a man behind the photo of Andy Warhol. Thus far, all copies meeting this description have been mono. They were still working at that early time to break that type of information out.
Yeah.
And again, you take what Discogs is now, and I can guarantee you that books like your Rolling Stone and my Osborne book, that this is where a lot of that base information was gleaned from for the beginnings of that database.
And thank you for bringing up that one because I think that now makes 60 episodes in a row. We've talked about this album, which is very important.
There we go. So, okay, in 1993, Velvet Underground and Nico mono with the banana and the upside down picture, $100 to $150.
Wow.
Is that a good price? Would you buy it for that?
I would buy it for that in a heartbeat, but it's a little bit more. But yet, I still think back in 1990, that would have been an incredible amount of money. I mean, I just think on how much I was making, for at my job, and like, wow, would that be an investment?
So yeah, Osborne breaks it out, stereo version with the adhesive banana sticker. There's a whole huge section in here in the butcher cover. I didn't even want to get into that, for crying out loud. So let me look really quickly over at Rush, and this is where I talked about the catalog number series.
Hmm.
So Rush, given their discography, even up until the early 90s, was fairly extensive, but it's simply broken out in this Osborne book. Mercury label, numbers 1000 through 4000 series, except 13, $5 to $8. And Mercury 13 is the hemispheres. They broke that out separately because there was a picture disc version of that only. So that comes in at a different price point. Mercury 7000 series. So what we'd have to do in the absence of saying, like in Discogs, okay, here is all of my late 1980s Rush, I'd have to go look at the catalog number and say, okay, the 7000 series, anything in that catalog range of 7000 $8 to $12 is a good price to pay. The 9,000 series, 10 to 15, blah blah blah. And I don't know, I don't remember offhand which ones those would be, but you're still going to be talking about like signals or permanent waves was probably earlier than that. So yeah, this it made it a little more difficult, but I think it also made you a little more, what's the word I'm looking for here? More a little more in touch with your collection because
Now,
it wasn't just a click.
now that Rush was for all Rush albums, just kind of lumped together on there. Wasn't it? So
It
if,
was. I mean, all Rush albums within that catalog number range.
yeah,
Catalog numbers, I guess I didn't really realize, but earlier in the band's career, yes, you're going to have 1,000 to 3,000, and then as they released more albums, the record labels would reserve those other numbers for their stuff later on, the higher numbers for the later albums.
yeah. So it wasn't broken down by album on here. The
No,
Velvet Underground, the Nick, they had that one broken down by the type of album. Here they just lumped it.
correct, and it's explained, I think, a little earlier in the Osborne, and the fact that it's because those tend to be a little more valuable because there are special
Yeah.
circumstances, i.e., the banana cover, the picture on the back. Whereas the Rush albums at that time, now as we talked about last week, you can say, okay, this has got the upside down newspaper article or the upside down newspaper headline. While that was known about, I don't think that that was a great big break point in prices that they needed to be concerned about with something that was as time consuming as creating this book annually.
Good. Now we were able to talk about that album for the 60th time in a row too. So
There we
we are
go.
consistent on this show.
We're holding true. Now I got curious and I went and looked up Osborne, and the Jerry Osborne stopped production of these books several years back. And I'm going to warn you, his website, and I don't know. I looked to see if information if he was still around, and I apologize for not knowing offhand. But his website looks like it's kind of stuck in the in the early 2000s, late 90s through here. And while they no longer sell the books, he actually sells. Well, he calls them PDF format copies of this for your smartphone or PDA device. That makes me think that this hasn't been updated in quite a while.
Yeah.
So it's out there, but this is something that just could not keep up with the newer generation of databases and things like Discogs to really pull all of this information together in one spot at your fingertips anytime you want it with just a single click.
Who would even want that? I mean, wow, that sure would be a whole lot easier to use.
Yeah, well, you're downloading a PDF to your smartphone device instead of now, Discogs is an app on your
Uh-huh.
phone.
Yeah.
I personally don't like the app. That's just me, but the other big thing with Discogs, I think that really revolutionized how we as collectors deal was their marketplace side of things.
Mhm.
And the market, let me call the marketplace up here. The marketplace, we've talked about how Discogs is a great thing for collectors who are organizing and maintaining their collections. But the other side of this is when they introduced the marketplace, was that you at your fingertips could just discover and explore and buy albums. I bought that index off of Discogs just this week. So you can scroll through the marketplace, you can create your want lists, you can just look for hot items. Whatever you want to do, it is right there. And it's almost too easy to buy this stuff just with a click of the mouse.
Yeah, especially when you spend your weeks in a hotel room and at night, maybe you had a beer or two at supper, and there you are, you open up Discogs, and oh Lord, the stuff that you wind up buying is just incredible.
So how did we? I mean, aside from record stores, you and I have both gone to record stores through the majority of our life. I cut my teeth in Ann Arbor and Lansing at Flat Black and Circular in East Lansing, and Wazoo in Ann Arbor, and a couple of points in between. And now I have my own, thankfully. But aside from going to record stores, if you wanted something a little bit further beyond, you wanted to find that special thing, and you couldn't just load up Discogs or you couldn't go to eBay in those pre-internet days, what did you do?
Yeah, yeah, it was very very tough. But the only thing that was out there was gold mine. I mean that was it, and that you looked at that, and for me, I knew nothing about the wax track. Obviously, I didn't read a lot about value of records or what goes on I read tons of magazines, but nothing about that kind of stuff. So I'd be looking and I go, what is this about? And then
Yeah.
began to learn a little bit and try to figure out, well, how much is this album worth? And, well,
Goldmine magazine, it's been around forever. Now they're obviously online. They actually have a marketplace of their own to sell. And Goldmine, to their credit, continues today in a smaller
yeah,
magazine form. This is one from earlier this year, and it's primarily comprised of articles about music. It's more of a that, but the thing of Goldmine back, and this is an issue from the early 2000s. Let's see, March of 2000 is where this issue is from. Yes, there's articles about music and it's cool reads, but primarily what's the coolest thing, and this is tough to see, these are dealer listings. And I do have an image of that called up here too. You have got dealer listings that carry you through. Let's see if I can find this one here, Steve. And you would go through, and I do remember this as well, just literally thumbing through these pages looking for something.
yeah, yeah.
And when you find it, you had to call the store to see if they had it, or you had to write them to see if they've had it. But we're just talking pages and pages of listings like this, which again are now made completely obsolete thanks to the internet. There was one store I remember doing a lot of business. It's called the Finest Record Store out of Greeley, Colorado. And I bought stuff from them and I sold it just because I found them and they were a good store to keep tabs with. And I got a lot of cool stuff from them prior to.
Now, see, I had the gold mine record pricing guide. So,
Yep.
and I mean, and obviously I no longer have that now, but it was fairly thick and it went through in very tiny, tiny print. The variants, the different variants. Then I'd be going there trying to check it off, kind of like a Beckett price guide,
Yeah.
for baseball
For
cards.
cards.
I had all my Beckett price guides and check, 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 check. Gold mine, except a little more difficult.
Again, that's just another thing that Discogs has made easier. Just in this early 2000, from year 2000, look at this ad I just found inside of this gold mine. It's for eBay. Little did they know, your roadmap to treasures on the internet is eBay from 19. Oh, this is advertising eBay magazine.
Okay.
For $20, you could get 12 monthly issues of eBay magazine.
We are an internet thing, but you can get a paper copy coming your way.
Yeah, and I mean these are cool to see and have and go through, but again, here's the get off my lawn. Kids today, can you imagine if we had to go back to using these to track our collections, using these to purchase our records? It's unfathomable to think that we would have to go back to something like that after having it so easy now for the past couple of decades
You know,
with the internet.
yeah, it makes you wonder though, if it was like that, would we have all the variants that are out there?
Yeah.
When you think about the collectability of what's happened, if we didn't have something like Discogs to put that all out in front of us, so we could see, what companies even bother doing this? We'd still just be back in the old days of black vinyl.
The Stone Ages, yeah. And the other thing too is, would the price of vinyl be where it is? And let me give you a bigger question. Would the resurgence of vinyl had happened had it not been for something like Discogs making collecting and buying and selling easier? Now, don't discount Record Store Day, the organization, their impact on vinyl making its comeback, if you will. I still don't like that term in the resurgence. I've got a problem with that, but you know me. But would any of that have happened without Discogs making this an easier thing to do for people?
I personally don't think, not nearly to what it's happened. I think prices definitely would be kind of lower because now all prices are based upon. I mean, think of the power of Discogs. I Someone bought it for this price. I go, hey, get to there, and then you go in. Now a record store goes, well, it's worth this much because someone bought it for that. Of course, now we're adding in fees and all that goes in there. So I go to a record store, it's priced by Discogs. Well, I'm also paying for those fees that are there. I mean, it's kind of nuts.
It is, and that's
Why not?
you and I have talked about my philosophy on that. Personally, I have stopped selling on Discogs. I'm coming up on about a year and a half now since I've sold on Discogs. simply because of those fees. Maybe I'll go back sometime, but I like the no stress of not selling online like that. I sell online to customers who come directly to me, but not through that marketplace. But that's just me. That's just me doing that. But yeah, the idea that the prices are driven by demand, and that demand, rather than an annual thing where you've got a few dozen dealers sending notes back to the publisher of a book, you now have instantly in Discogs with their latest update. I think it's the last 30 sales of tracking. So
Yeah.
you get that aggregate of saying, okay, there is now a sudden demand for this artist for this reason. This release is now worth this much to sellers, and that happens instantly.
So now you have that guy that's been on the road sitting in his hotel room after one or two beers deciding to buy something at too high a price, buys it, and now the next day that album's worth even more money.
That goes into the average and into the aggregate. Thank you very much, Steve, for your doing your part to help with the
Everyone
resurgence.
stop drinking and buying records, damn it. You're jacking up our prices.
So now I cannot imagine at this stage in my life as a collector, at this stage of my life as a business operator owning a record store, I cannot imagine what life would be like without Discogs.
Yeah.
And we've talked before too about, is it getting too big? Are they changing things around too much? But God, I hope they don't go away because I don't know what I'd do.
Yeah. I For me, it's added something different with the hobby. It took me away from just how many records can I have to this is the one I want to chase. I
Yep.
want to go after that because it's a special cover and it brings some excitement. I think to me instead just like, look, I got 100 albums there and I got them each for a buck. And a lot of people still find that excites them, and that's great because it's about what you like. For me, as it's the movement of what I do with collecting, changed, and especially after the flood. Now, I want certain albums, special albums, because they bring me real happiness.
Yep. And it's made easier like that.
Oh yeah,
Now, there are very quickly, as before we wrap up here, there are some happening to try to challenge Discogs, and essentially they're,
hmm
as I mentioned, Goldmine now has its own little marketplace. There's other little ones that pop up there. There's other databases that are trying to do what Discogs has done. And I had a list of some of these other databases, but no one can come near the sheer user-driven amount of information that Discogs contains. Very quickly, this is one that just popped up, I think, just a couple of weeks back. And this is not to be confused. And this is, I got thinking there's going to be a lawsuit about this at some point because there is already something called an all music database for music. This is not that all music, unless they are connected and I don't realize it. But this is something called All Music DB. And this is supposed to be a challenger to Discogs. Now, I want to kick this out here to any of our viewers who might dig this out and look. I've not signed up for an account with these guys because, quite frankly, I just don't trust them yet because there does not seem to be any guardrails. And you can say what you want about Discogs and the amount of fraud that happens on there. There's at least something in that method now to police that type of thing happening. And from what I can tell, this All Music DB does not have that because it's not centralized like Discogs is. Buyers and sellers meet on Discogs and utilize that platform to do their business. This seems to just connect buyers and sellers directly and then says it's up to you guys to deal with it, which I think is a little dangerous because that opens the door for a lot of abuse in some cases. So I've poked around this a little bit. I don't see it as being a huge challenger for Discogs, but you never know. I don't know.
Wouldn't that make it confusing? Well, now we got two pricing things. Which you go to the store. So which pricing guide do you use to price your records?
Are you a Osborne guy or are you a Rolling Stones guy?
That's right.
Which is it going to be?
Yep. Wow.
Well, regardless, Discogs is here to stay. I hope it does, and I harp on it a bit. I complain a lot about it, but I use it every day, so I see these little intricacies and nuances. Like with the update last week, I talked about. caught me by surprise. I'm still getting used to it, but it's a good update. I'm not going to complain about it. But lo and behold, I think I would complain if it ever went away.
Yeah. Except now,
Or
now I get pop-up windows.
yeah, they started pop-up windows. That's to help pay for everything.
Yeah, it's like, damn you, stop it.
Yeah, the idea was if you've ever looked at Discogs, by the way, without being signed in, you see advertisements, a lot more of them. The idea was is that to get you to sign up is that you don't see the ads, but now they're popping up ads, but it's all internal Discog stuff. Like,
Yeah.
hey, look at this is what we're doing. Hey, check out this other thing that we're doing, and check out this seller. Check out this high end album that sold, which is self promotion. So I mean that's all right. I'll click out of that, but so, well, what do you folks think? How integral is Discogs to your collecting experience? Do you come from a time like we do, the Stone Ages, if you will, from before there was an internet that made our collecting easier slash uh, easier yet harder? How's that?
Yeah. Print is not dead, so don't even think about it. I still use my Rolling Stone. I mean, I got a whole bunch of them back there of these guides. I use them all the time, even as I research my Sunday show still. I love it.
Getting ready for this episode, I got to admit, I had some fun going through the old Osborne. I haven't looked at that in a couple of decades, it feels like.
Yeah.
So, well, cool. Steve, as always, very good talking with you. Fun stuff. Folks, let us know what you think. You can head over to the Two Guys Talking About Records Facebook page. You can comment on the Spotify episodes, and you can comment on the YouTube episodes. Check in with us. Let us know how you're doing. Let us know how you used to do it versus how you do it now. Love to hear. All right, Steve. You have a great week, sir, and I hope that snow melts a little bit for you out there.
Hey, thanks, Jim. You also have a great week. I'm sending it your way, so don't you worry about a thing.
All right, so until next time, my name's Jim, and I own a record store.
I am Steve, a record collector.